The art of defeating an enemy without engaging in direct combat has been a principle of warfare, diplomacy, and strategy for centuries. Sun Tzu, the ancient Chinese military strategist, famously said, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." This philosophy has been implemented in various forms across history, from psychological warfare to economic strangulation. Before delving into strategies, it is essential to define what constitutes an enemy. An enemy is not necessarily someone who wishes you physical harm. It could be a rival, competitor, or even an ideological opponent. The goal is not always to annihilate them but to neutralize their threat, diminish their influence, or render them irrelevant. In this situation, destroying an enemy does not imply physical destruction but rather achieving a state where they no longer pose a challenge. This can be accomplished through psychological, social, economic, or political means. In this video, we will explore the different methods of undermining an adversary without engaging in direct fight, supported by real-world examples. Psychological warfare. Winning the mind game. Psychological warfare involves manipulating an enemy's perceptions, creating fear, confusion, or even admiration. This can lead to self-doubt, paranoia, and eventual surrender. Example: the Cold War, United States vs. Soviet Union. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in an arms race and propaganda war without direct military conflict. The U. used media, cultural exchanges, and economic superiority to portray capitalism as superior. The Star Wars program, Strategic Defense Initiative, was an example of psychological warfare. By making the Soviets believe the U. had superior technology, they were forced to overspend on military development, contributing to their collapse. Key strategies: misinformation, spread false intelligence to create uncertainty. Fear induction, promote narratives that make the enemy feel weak or doomed. Cultural influence, shape global perceptions in your favor. Economic warfare, bleeding the enemy dry. Economic strategies can be used to weaken an adversary by limiting their access to resources, markets, and financial stability. Example: the U.S. sanctions on Iran. The United States has employed economic sanctions on Iran to cripple its economy, making it difficult for the country to fund its military and regional influence. By restricting Iran's ability to trade oil and access the global banking system, the U.S. has forced internal economic struggles, leading to public discontent and political instability. Key strategies: trade embargoes, limit or cut off essential supplies. Financial restrictions, prevent access to global banking networks. Market manipulation, flood markets with cheap alternatives to weaken competitors. Political sabotage, destabilizing from within. Creating internal strife within an adversary's leadership can lead to their downfall without external intervention. Example: the fall of the Soviet Union. The United States played a key role in encouraging internal dissent within the USSR by supporting dissident movements, funding opposition media, and highlighting governmental inefficiencies. Over time, internal economic struggles and political dissatisfaction led to the collapse of the Soviet Union without direct military intervention. Key strategies: support opposition groups, fund and empower internal adversaries, expose corruption, leak information that undermines trust, encourage defections, convince key figures to abandon their cause. For social influence, controlling the narrative. Controlling information and public perception is a powerful tool in weakening an enemy without war. Example: British divide and rule strategy in India. The British Empire successfully used the divide and rule strategy in India, pitting different religious and ethnic groups against each other. This strategy prevented a unified resistance, allowing the British to maintain control for centuries without constant military engagement. Key strategies: media domination, control news and entertainment to shape public opinion. Divide and rule, create internal divisions within enemy societies. Cultural disruption, undermine traditions that unify the enemy. Cyber warfare, the modern battlefield in the digital age. Cyber warfare is an effective means of attacking an enemy without physical confrontation. Example: Russian cyber attacks on U.S. elections. Russia has been accused of using cyber tactics to influence the U.S. elections by hacking, spreading misinformation, and creating social media divisions. This kind of warfare undermines trust in institutions without direct violence. Key strategies: hacking critical infrastructure, disrupt power grids, banking systems, and communication networks. Misinformation campaigns spread fake news to destabilize societies. Data manipulation, leak or alter sensitive information. Strategic alliances, isolating the enemy. Forming strong alliances can diplomatically and economically isolate an adversary, making them weaker without confrontation. Example: NATO's encirclement of Russia. By expanding NATO and forming alliances around Russia, Western nations have limited Russia's influence and options without direct conflict. Sanctions and military partnerships prevent Russia from expanding its power. Key strategies: form stronger alliances, build coalitions that outweigh the enemy. Diplomatic isolation, ensure adversaries have fewer allies. Create alternative economic systems, block enemy nations from key markets. 7. Soft power, winning hearts and minds. Soft power is the ability to influence others through culture, ideology, and diplomacy rather than force. Example: the U. Cultural influence on China. Despite political tensions, American culture, movies, music, and brands, has deeply influenced Chinese youth. This has created internal ideological shifts, making it harder for the Chinese government to fully control its population's mindset. Key strategies: export culture, spread music, films, and technology. Encourage ideological shifts, promote democratic and liberal values. Use humanitarian efforts, provide aid to win public goodwill. A few remarkable examples of winning without fighting. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the U. and the Soviet Union were on the brink of nuclear war. Instead of engaging in direct conflict, President John F. Kennedy used a combination of diplomacy, strategic patience, and a naval blockade to force the Soviets to withdraw their missiles from Cuba. This demonstrated the power of negotiation and restraint over brute force. The fall of the Berlin Wall, 1989. The Berlin Wall, a symbol of Cold War division, fell not through military action but through a combination of diplomatic efforts, economic pressure, and grassroots movements. The U. and its allies used economic incentives and political dialogue to encourage reform in the Soviet bloc, ultimately leading to the wall's collapse. Apple vs. Microsoft, 1990s. In the 1990s, Apple was struggling to compete with Microsoft's dominance in the personal computer market. Instead of engaging in a direct price war, Apple focused on innovation, branding, and creating a loyal customer base. This strategy allowed Apple to carve out a niche market and eventually surpass Microsoft in market value. Gandhi's nonviolent resistance. Mahatma Gandhi's campaign for Indian independence is a classic example of winning without fighting. Through nonviolent protests, civil disobedience, and moral persuasion, Gandhi was able to weaken British colonial rule and inspire a global movement for peace and justice. Conclusion: destroying an enemy without fighting is not about brute force or aggression. It is about intelligence, strategy, and patience. By understanding your enemy's weaknesses, leveraging your strengths, and using indirect methods, you can achieve victory with minimal conflict. However, it is crucial to consider the ethical implications of your actions and strive for outcomes that promote justice and harmony. As Sun Tzu wisely said, to win 100 victories in 100 battles is not the acme of skill. To subdue the enemy without fighting is the acme of skill. Whether in war, business, or personal relationships, this timeless wisdom remains relevant and powerful. Real-world examples show that these methods have been successfully applied throughout history, proving that strategic thinking can often be more powerful than brute force. As Sun Tzu advised, to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting.